I often get comments saying that even though what I talk about is helpful, you suck at art a bit too much. Even when I try to show you how even an artist that isn't skilled could shift something bad into something kind of workable, these same comments appear. So I started a subreddit, and now I've taken a look at some of your art, and I disagree. I think a lot of you actually have quite a bit that is working. So I'm going to go through each and every example, but I'm going to point out a similar theme. So I want us to start with this example by AHappyWaterMelon. AHappyWaterMelon is a programmer that wants to make a slow-paced horror survival shooter. He wants to make things clean, because he isn't that good at drawing. He's also thinking about removing the feet animation, I'm assuming because he doesn't like it. He's also thinking about going into 4K vector graphics. Well, while I often talk about simple art, I first and foremost think it's important to think about what type of game you're making and what the game demands, even if it feels tricky to make. But I think this idea of what simple means is actually holding you back. I make this type of simple aesthetic because I do cute platformer art. But you can see as soon as I want to emulate more of a mature game, then I actually go less simple and more messy. So here I made my own sketch to show you what I mean. I used your character as a reference. But instead of going it clean and 4K vector graphics, I'm making it dirty. And I'm making it erratic and unclean. Mind you, I don't think this is more difficult to make. But I personally feel that if you're going for horror, you need to be a bit more confident in making it ugly and messy. Because in this instance, it can actually be beneficial. So I don't think this is more difficult to draw. Look at this sketch. It looks horrendous, but when you see the animation, it kind of works. And in this case that you showed here, I think the reason you might not like the feet is because you haven't really referenced top-down animations. We need a bit of that shoulder and head movement to make it feel less static. Overall, I think you nailed most of that horror vibe. But I think it can be helpful to think about games that do this genre well, like Limbo, and just be confident in what you're going for, have a vision, and execute on what that vision demands, even if it seems difficult. So for our next example, I want us to look at Dual Gen Studios, with his game Medal Winners. Medal Winners didn't really add much in terms of what he's going for, but we can see a clear and distinct vision overall. But I want to point out a similar problem to the last person. I like the vibe, almost reminiscent of Pizza Tower or Beavis and Butthead, or 2005 Flash games for that matter. The characters are awesome, but it isn't consistent. Some things are very straight and smooth, and others are quite hand-drawn. And in this situation, I would probably look at what I like most about this vibe, and try and have more of that. Personally, I really like the characters the most, and that sort of loose feel. I actually also like the colors. But I think the text and the UI and the sort of really boxy stuff isn't really aiding that vision. I'm guessing that you feel that it will look messy if you try to do it hand-drawn, but I think the UI and the flags make it seem less intentional. Because now what the person sees playing this is they see the character, they see something that they like, but then they see the other stuff, and since the signs and stuff don't really match the characters, now the character starts looking less intentional. It looks more as if you accidentally stumbled on something nice, because you haven't made the vision coherent. We can see in a situation like Pizza Tower, how all the line art is really thin, and none of it is really perfectly straight or smooth. And we can actually see here how the UI, since all the platforms aren't drawn smoothly, neither is the text. And we can see that it works much better, because it looks like someone decided to pick this text. It doesn't look as much as if you actually care for what the text font is. And I think players often notice that. Now this doesn't mean that you can't use a font. Tales of Iron uses a font and it matches really well. But I think it's important to think about it. If this looks boxy, but the rest of the game doesn't, what does that say about the overall game? But with that said, I want to actually look at someone who does this really well. We have some art here by Zizaco. Now Zizaco is overall done with his game, and he just wants some harsh feedback. But I actually don't have that much. Overall, we can see that he thinks about every aspect. And we can see, even in this instance, he does actually put effort into how the text looks, and how the icons and UI looks. Because he realizes that all of those aspects actually impact and matter for the overall impression. He clearly has a vision for this cute, goofy style. He picks thin line art and some kind of colder colors, and then just goes a bit crazy. Some of it is kind of ugly, some of it is kind of loose and dirty, but it all serves the vision. It becomes ugly in a good way. It's really awesome and cute. I will say that I think these edges of the scene where we have these 3D boxes with 2D textures look less nice, and I personally think the solution in Cult of the Lamb looks better. But I hope you see what I mean when I say that this character looks a bit goofy, but it looks good. And it looks intentional in this context. If you want to play this game, you can find it on itch.io and you can see it on the subreddit. With that said, I want us to look at the next person. That's Dale Play with Esferibot. They haven't written that much, but they've mentioned that they've mostly made custom procedural shaders, and they're considering going a bit further on that direction instead of the classic PBR style materials. And we can see that we have this mix here with the character going in sort of one direction and the background going in another direction. And that's actually the feedback I have to give. It doesn't feel as if the character and the background matches. It doesn't feel like the overall game has a story. We can see on Steam that it's talking about what happened to this automated space station. You're taking control of the last working robot on the base and trying to find it out. And so with this theme, I'm thinking something like Wall-E or Portal. I'm thinking, okay, how do we execute on that story? How do we sell that to the person? And currently, we have this space station, but the space station, the background doesn't actually sell that story. And I want the background to sell that story. I think the character actually tells that story fairly well. But I think that instead of thinking about, okay, which custom shader should I use? It's about how do we really sell this impression to the player? How do I make the theme of my game, the idea of my game, of an automated space station in disrepair, and make every single part of my game sell that idea? It sometimes feels as if people are overly concerned about how they draw, instead of thinking about how nice this looks in isolation, how nice this asset is drawn. But the overall thing that makes each game work is that they care about each and every detail of the game. They make every choice seem intentional. And you can make things ugly as long as you make it seem intentional. But if you make it ugly and it looks as if it's ugly because you didn't care enough to make it good, then the person playing will notice that. And so you could go in the direction of PBR style materials or direction of the character, or you could go in the direction of the background. But I want both of these aspects to also match the story of your game. As now we come to the next person. Here we have Blind Ninja. Now Blind Ninja has uploaded 2 versions because I was too slow with this video. And they're saying this is going to be their first Steam game. They started out with this version and then they later uploaded this version. And we can see that some of the changes they made were matching the outline better. But here I want to point out a similar thing, which harkens back to our previous examples. This seems like a UI game. And when we're making a UI game, we really need to think about the overall impression of the UI. And we can see each asset actually has a perfectly distinct style. It's done really well. The assets are cute. This fork is cute. This earth globe is cute. We can see even in the corner at least, where it says main, it seems intentional. On the other end we have the pet is hungry, which seems less intentional, but I'm assuming that might change eventually. But I actually want to point out a thing here in the transition of when you click an icon. You click it, and then you have a static switch to other icons. This switch is static in a game that feels hand-drawn. And so even in a situation like this, when you click an icon and have this switch, I would think about making something like the icons drop down or from a thread or something similar. Like this, which is an example by me with some stupid assets I had lying around. I obviously don't have to do it in this situation, but I'm just pointing out that even though the assets work, the assets look nice, we want each and everything, even something like the transition between assets, to also match that style. To also feel hand-drawn and not artificial and static. Because I think what you have actually works. It looks cute. I like it. And the style of how each asset is drawn actually matches perfectly well with all other assets. Except for this Arial text in the corner. I don't know if it's Arial. Is it Arial? I hope it's Arial. Because I've been saying Arial a lot. It looks like Arial. I should probably check. And since you actually say that it's a Steam game, I would probably also look to making the icons and UI slightly smaller. Because if it's supposed to be played on a computer, then it's going to be 21 inches or bigger. And so we don't actually need this big UI. It becomes a bit cluttered. And so if you do all of these things, and think about all these aspects, then you might actually be getting something closer to what we have here with Inverted Journey. This was uploaded by relevant username 2, which I'm assuming isn't his name, but you can obviously see this on the Steam page. They mentioned that they have pretty much 0 art skills and been making the art style intentionally very basic. They're thinking that maybe it's a bit too simple, but I think that this game actually showcases my overall point. This person says that they can't draw, but I actually wouldn't be able to see that. To me, each and every choice looks intentional and it looks good. It looked like they made this really simple aesthetic for the sole purpose of making this game the best game possible. And yes, if you want to make it slightly less basic, you could look into using particle effects or grain shaders like I've done in many scenes. Or you could use something like foliage shaders on the trees here, for instance, to make them slightly more interactive. There are 2 things I would mention in this scenario, because I think the overall vibe has really been nailed. It looks really good. This character, when it falls, it doesn't really have a landing animation. So when you land, and then you do this inversion switch, you get this small second that can be perceived as a micro stutter. And you can handle this by making a small bounce landing, so that you either land and bounce, or if you do this land and switch, like they do here, then the animations would kind of blend with each other. These are small things. Maybe these changes work, maybe they don't, but you already have a lot of stuff that does work. And because you already have so much that work, it often comes down to making your game even more cohesive and even more polished. And how much you want to push that is up to you. I would personally, in some of these situations, like this scene with the pipes, maybe add some silhouettes of like a water pipe or a sign. Small details that make each area just slightly more like a real world. Overall, you say that you can't draw, but I wouldn't be able to notice. And this is why I wanted to make this as one coherent video. When I, as an outsider, see your game, I'm not just thinking about what's really good and what you do really well. I think, okay, why is he doing that thing differently than that thing? I'm thinking, oh, because he doesn't actually care or doesn't actually know how to do it. And so you really want to avoid that impression. You never want to impart the impression on the player that you don't care about something or that you don't know how to do it. Because as soon as that impression sticks, it leaves a sour taste in the player. But whenever a choice looks intentional, I can even excuse not liking that choice. But if I don't like it and it doesn't make sense to me why you made that decision, then my overall impression will be lower. I'm really sorry for this super late video. You can check the subreddit that I made, Nonsensical 2D. I might still make more of these, but since I'm doing this extremely part-time, I'm not sure how reliable I can be with it, as you noticed with this scenario. And obviously, most of this is my opinion. I mentioned this in my original feedback video. I might be giving bad advice, but it is stuff that I at least think or believe. Awesome stuff by all of the people that submitted. Thanks for watching. Bye.